My name is Lorraine, a 62-year-old elementary school teacher who still loves working with children after all these years. I never expected that a sudden collapse in my classroom would reveal just how far my relationship with my only son had deteriorated. When the hospital called James and he never showed up, I was hurt. But nothing prepared me for discovering my daughter-in-law's social media post that same day, captioned, "Finally a day without the drama queen," while they vacationed at a luxury resort. That betrayal led me to make one life-changing decision they never saw coming. Let me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of silent heartbreak. James was my world from the moment he was born. As a single mother after my husband Robert died of heart disease when James was only 8, I poured everything I had into giving him a good life. I worked 2 jobs most weeks, teaching elementary school during the day and tutoring in the evenings to make ends meet. Despite our financial struggles, we were close. We had a special bond that I thought could never be broken. "Mom, look what I made." I can still hear his excited voice as he ran through the door after school, eager to show me his latest art project or science experiment. James was always a bright, sensitive boy, thoughtful and kind but lacking confidence. He needed my encouragement to try new things, to believe in himself. "You can do anything you set your mind to, sweetheart," I would tell him. And he believed me. We were a team facing the world together. I remember the countless nights I stayed up helping him with homework, the weekends spent at his soccer games, cheering from the sidelines, even when I was exhausted from working all week. I packed his lunch every day until high school, with little notes of encouragement tucked inside. When he struggled with math in 9th grade, I used my teacher's discount to buy extra workbooks and spent hours helping him practice until his grades improved. The financial sacrifices were significant. I drove the same old car for 15 years, patching it up rather than replacing it. Vacations were rare, usually just short trips to visit my sister Dorothy a few hours away. My clothes came from discount stores while I made sure James had what he needed to fit in with his peers. I put aside a small amount from each paycheck for his college fund, determined that he would have opportunities I never had. When James earned a partial scholarship to State University, I was so proud. It wasn't enough to cover everything, so I took out a small home equity loan on our modest house to help with his tuition and living expenses. I didn't tell him about this. I didn't want him to worry about money when he should be focusing on his studies. He was the first in our family to go to college, and that achievement meant everything to me. It was during his sophomore year that he met Amanda. James called me sounding more animated than I'd heard him in months. "Mom, I met someone. She's amazing, smart, beautiful, and she's studying business administration. Her name is Amanda." I was happy for him, of course. James had always been somewhat shy around girls, and I was glad he'd found someone who seemed to appreciate him. When he brought her home during spring break, I tried to be welcoming. Amanda was indeed beautiful, tall, with perfect blonde hair and an impeccable sense of style. She was polite, but there was a certain coolness to her demeanor that made me slightly uncomfortable. "Your home is cute," she said, glancing around my living room with barely concealed judgment. "Very cozy." I noticed how she subtly redirected James's conversations, how she would squeeze his arm when he started talking about childhood memories or inside jokes with me. Her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. Still, I told myself I was being oversensitive. Amanda was accomplished and ambitious. She came from a wealthy family and had plans to work in corporate finance after graduation. Perhaps she was just reserved or nervous about meeting her boyfriend's mother. I made an extra effort to connect with her, asking about her studies and family, preparing her favorite foods when James mentioned them. The changes in James were subtle at first. He called less frequently. When we did talk, Amanda was often there in the background and he seemed distracted. He came home less during breaks, explaining that Amanda's family had invited him to their beach house, or they were taking a trip to New York. "Amanda thinks it's important for me to network with her father's business associates," he explained when he canceled our Christmas plans for the second year in a row. "This could really help my career, Mom. You understand, right?" I did understand, or at least I tried to. I wanted him to succeed, to have opportunities, but I couldn't ignore the ache in my heart as I spent another holiday alone, looking at the presents I'd carefully wrapped for him that would now have to be mailed. After graduation, James took a job at the same financial firm where Amanda had been hired. They moved in together, and our contact became even more infrequent. When he did call, he seemed to be reading from a script, giving me brief updates about work, but sharing few personal details. "Amanda and I are getting married," he announced during one of these calls about a year after graduation. There was happiness in his voice, but something else too, a nervousness that hadn't been there before. "That's wonderful news," I said, pushing down my hurt that he hadn't told me they were even engaged. "I'm so happy for you both." The wedding planning revealed just how much I had been sidelined in my son's life. Amanda's parents took charge, and my offers to help were politely but firmly declined. "Amanda's mother has very specific ideas about the wedding," James explained. "It's easier if we just go along with what she wants." When Amanda's mother called to discuss the wedding with me, it was really to inform me about decisions already made. The ceremony would be at an exclusive country club where her family were members. The color scheme, flowers menu, everything had been decided without any input from me. "We'll need you to wear navy blue to complement our color palette," she told me. "And we've arranged for a professional stylist to do your hair and makeup. Amanda is very particular about how the photos will look." I swallowed my pride and agreed. This was their day, I reminded myself. My role was to support, not to impose my own wishes. When the topic of finances came up, I offered to contribute what I could. "That's not necessary," Amanda's father said dismissively when James brought it up at a dinner I had been invited to. "We want to give the kids the wedding of their dreams." But later James called me privately. "Mom, the wedding is costing more than we expected," he admitted. "If you could help with the honeymoon expenses, that would really take some pressure off." Of course, I agreed, withdrawing $5,000 from my retirement savings to help pay for their 2-week trip to Europe. James seemed grateful, but at the wedding itself, I felt like an afterthought. I was seated at a table far from the main party with distant relatives of Amanda's who barely spoke to me. My one dance with my son was brief, interrupted when Amanda cut in, saying they needed to greet some important guests. As I watched them move among the crowd, James seemed to be following Amanda's lead, smiling and chatting with people I didn't recognize. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but also somehow diminished, as if he were playing a role in someone else's production. "He looks happy, though," Dorothy whispered to me, squeezing my hand under the table. "That's what matters, right?" "Right," I agreed, blinking back tears. But as I drove home alone that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing my son in ways I had never anticipated. 5 years had passed since the wedding, and the distance between James and me had only grown wider. He had risen quickly at the investment firm, working long hours that he said left little time for family visits. When I did see him, he looked perpetually tired, dark circles under his eyes, and a tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there before. Amanda had transitioned from corporate finance to real estate, joining a high-end agency that specialized in luxury properties. According to James, she was thriving already, one of their top-selling agents within her first year. "Amanda has an eye for what people really want," he told me during one of our rare phone conversations. "She can walk into any space and immediately know how to market it." What he didn't say, but what became increasingly clear, was that Amanda had taken control of their finances, making all major decisions about their spending and investments. This included the 3-bedroom home they had purchased in an upscale neighborhood about an hour from where I lived. That house held a special significance for me, though James seemed to have forgotten this important detail. When they were house hunting, they had fallen in love with a property that was slightly beyond their budget. James had called me uncharacteristically emotional. "Mom, this house is perfect. This house. It has everything we want. A great school district for when we have kids, a home office for Amanda, a yard. But we're about $150,000 short for the down payment we'd need to make it work." I hadn't hesitated. After Robert died, I had received a life insurance payout that I'd carefully preserved, knowing it might be needed someday for an emergency or to help James. I had always thought it might go toward his children's education someday, but helping them secure a home seemed just as important. "I want to help you get that house," I told him. "I have some money from your father's insurance. It was always meant for your future." When I transferred the money, my financial advisor had suggested adding my name to the deed as a co-owner to protect my investment. "It's just a precaution," he had explained. "Given the size of your contribution, it makes sense to have legal standing in the property." James had readily agreed at the time, seemingly grateful for the protection this gave all of us. The house became a source of pride for Amanda, who filled it with expensive furniture and spent thousands on landscaping. Whenever I visited, which became increasingly rare, I felt like a guest in a museum, afraid to touch anything or sit in the wrong place. The birth of my granddaughter Katie 3 years ago had briefly brought a new connection to their lives. I had hoped that becoming parents would soften Amanda's attitude toward me, that she might see the value of having a grandmother involved in her child's life. For a short while it seemed possible. Katie was a delightful child, with James's sensitive eyes and curious nature. She took to me immediately, reaching for me when I visited and giggling at the simple games I played with her. Those precious hours with Katie became the highlight of my life. "Ba," she would call me, unable to pronounce grandma yet. Her little arms would reach up and my heart would melt all over again. But even this joy was carefully rationed by Amanda, who seemed to find reasons to cancel planned visits at the last minute. "Katie's not feeling well today." She would text sometimes just an hour before I was expected to arrive, after I'd already baked cookies or bought a small gift for my granddaughter. Or, "We forgot we have a play date scheduled with the neighbor's kids. Can we reschedule?" The rescheduling rarely happened. Weeks would pass, and my texts asking to see Katie would receive delayed responses or none at all. Family gatherings became exercises in patience and restraint. At Katie's second birthday party, I arrived with a handmade quilt I had spent months creating, stitching in fabrics with bright colors and different textures I thought she would enjoy exploring. "Oh, it's homemade," Amanda said, barely glancing at it before setting it aside. Later I noticed it had disappeared completely, while the expensive designer outfits from Amanda's friends were prominently displayed and photographed for her social media accounts. I was assigned to help in the kitchen during that party, kept busy with dishes and serving, while Amanda's parents were given the honor of sitting next to Katie as she opened presents. When it came time for photos, I was an afterthought. "Oh, we should get one with James's mom too," Amanda's mother said, as if suddenly remembering my existence. The photo was quick, perfunctory, and as far as I could tell, never shared anywhere. It was during that same party that I overheard Amanda talking to James in the hallway, thinking I was still in the kitchen. "Your mother keeps hovering over Katie. It's making me uncomfortable," she said. "And did you see that old-fashioned quilt? It doesn't match anything in Katie's room." "Mom means well," James replied, his voice low. "She just wants to be involved." "That's the problem," Amanda insisted. "She's always trying to be involved, acting like she knows better than me how to raise my daughter. She's such a drama queen, James, always finding ways to make things about her." I froze, the plate I was carrying nearly slipping from my hands. Drama queen. Me. I had spent my entire life trying not to be a burden to support James without asking for anything in return. The few times I had been ill or needed help, I had specifically avoided telling James, not wanting to worry him or impose. What hurt even more was James's response: silence. No defense of me, no disagreement with Amanda's characterization. Just a quiet sigh that seemed to accept her version of reality. I left the party early, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely fictional. James walked me to my car, a brief moment alone. "Is everything okay, Mom?" he asked, a flicker of the old James showing through. "You've seemed quiet today." I nearly told him then what I had overheard, how deeply it had hurt me. But looking at his tired face, the worry lines already forming around his eyes, I couldn't bring myself to add to his burdens. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired. Give Katie a kiss goodnight for me." He hugged me briefly, then hurried back inside when Amanda called his name from the doorway. As the months passed, the pattern continued. My attempts to maintain a connection were met with polite disinterest or outright avoidance. James forgot my birthday that year, sending a belated text 3 days later with a generic, "Sorry, things have been crazy at work." There was no invitation for Thanksgiving, and when I asked about Christmas plans, James was vague. "We're not sure yet, Mom. Amanda's parents might be planning something. I'll let you know." He never did. I spent the holiday with Dorothy trying to focus on her family's warmth, rather than the ache of my son's absence. It was a Tuesday in late October, a typical school day at Lincoln Elementary, where I had taught third grade for over 20 years. The classroom was decorated for fall with student artwork of colorful leaves and pumpkins covering the walls. I loved this time of year. The excitement of a new school year had settled into a comfortable routine, and the children were engaged and curious. That morning I had felt unusually tired. The previous weeks had been demanding a field trip to the Science Museum parent-teacher conferences, and curriculum planning meetings had left me with little time to rest. At 62, I didn't bounce back from exhaustion as quickly as I once had. "You look pale, Lorraine," my colleague Sarah commented during our brief lunch break. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just a bit tired," I assured her. "Nothing a good night's sleep won't fix." But as the afternoon progressed, a persistent headache began building behind my eyes, and I noticed my words occasionally slurring as I read aloud to the class. When I stood up to write on the whiteboard, a wave of dizziness washed over me, and the marker slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. The room seemed to tilt sideways, and I gripped the edge of my desk to steady myself. 20 young faces looked at me with growing concern. "Mrs. Powell, are you okay?" asked Zach, one of my most perceptive students. I tried to respond to reassure them, but the words wouldn't form properly. The pressure in my head intensified, and breathing became difficult. Through a narrowing tunnel of vision, I saw Sarah appear in the doorway for our scheduled team meeting. Her expression shifted from greeting to alarm as she rushed toward me. "Lorraine, sit down now." Her voice seemed to come from far away, as she guided me to my chair. Turning to the students, she said calmly, "Class, I need someone to run to the office and get Principal Davis right away." The next moments were a blur of activity. Sarah's hand on my shoulder, the principal's concerned face, a call to 911. I wanted to protest to say I was fine, that I just needed a moment to rest, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The paramedics arrived with surprising speed, their efficient hands checking my vital signs as they asked questions I struggled to answer. "Possible TIA," one paramedic said to another. "Transient ischemic attack. We need to get her to County Hospital now." The children's wide eyes watched as I was transferred to a gurney. I tried to smile to give them a reassuring wave, not wanting to frighten them. Sarah promised to take care of my class and said she would contact my family. "James," I managed to say, giving her my phone. "Call James." The ambulance ride was surreal, lights, flashing sirens, wailing, an oxygen mask placed over my face. I had always been healthy, rarely even catching the colds that regularly circulated through the school. This sudden vulnerability terrified me. At the hospital, I was rushed through triage into a curtained area in the emergency department. A doctor with kind eyes but a serious expression performed a series of neurological tests, asking me to smile, raise my arms, repeat phrases. "Mrs. Powell, your symptoms suggest you've experienced what we call a mini-stroke, or TIA," he explained. "The good news is that your symptoms are already improving, which is typical for a TIA. But this is a warning sign we need to take seriously." More tests followed, blood draws, an MRI, and echocardiogram. The doctor explained that stress, high blood pressure, and exhaustion had likely contributed to my condition. I would need to stay overnight for observation, and would require follow-up care and possibly medication adjustments. Throughout the procedures and examinations, I kept expecting James to arrive. Each time the curtain moved, I looked up hopefully, but it was always another nurse or technician. The hours stretched on, and still no James. "Did someone contact my son?" I asked a nurse as she checked my blood pressure for the third time. "Yes, ma'am," she confirmed. "The emergency contact in your phone was notified right after you arrived. Is there someone else we should call?" "My sister Dorothy," I said, giving her the number. "But my son, he should have been here by now." The nurse's expression was carefully neutral. Sometimes it takes a while for family to arrange things. Try not to worry, we're taking good care of you. By evening, I had been moved to a regular room for overnight observation. Still no James. I tried calling his cell phone several times, but each call went straight to voicemail. I left messages trying to keep the worry from my voice. James, it's Mom. I'm at County Hospital. Nothing too serious, but I'd really like to see you. Please call when you get this. No response. I texted too, thinking perhaps he couldn't talk, but might read a message. Nothing. As night fell, a new nurse came to check on me. Is your family coming soon? She asked kindly. I'm not sure, I admitted. My son hasn't responded to calls. She frowned slightly. Would you like me to try again? I nodded, and she stepped out with my phone. When she returned, her expression told me everything before she spoke. I'm sorry, Mrs. Powell. I wasn't able to reach him either. Is there anyone else who could come stay with you tonight? It's good to have support after a health scare like this. The reality of my situation hit me fully then. My only child, the person I had devoted my life to raising and supporting, couldn't be bothered to come to the hospital when I had a stroke. The pain of this realization was sharper than any physical discomfort I'd experienced that day. I could call my sister, I said, my voice small, but she lives 3 hours away. Just then, Sarah appeared in the doorway, still in her teaching clothes, but carrying an overnight bag. I thought you might need some things, she said, setting the bag down. I stopped by your house and packed a nightgown, toothbrush, and some clean clothes for tomorrow. Tears sprang to my eyes at this simple kindness from a colleague who had become a friend over the years, but was not family. Thank you, I whispered. James hasn't come. Sarah's expression darkened briefly before she composed herself. Well, I'm here, and I can stay if you'd like some company. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Throughout the night, my phone remained silent. No calls, no texts from my son. Sarah dozed in the recliner beside my bed, insisting she was comfortable despite my protests that she should go home. By morning, the doctors confirmed that I had indeed experienced a TIA, likely brought on by stress and overwork. They prescribed blood pressure medication and advised rest for at least a week before returning to work. Sarah drove me home and helped me settle in, making sure I had food in the fridge and my medications organized. Still no word from James. I sent one more text. Home now. Doctor says it was a mini stroke. I'm okay, but would really like to hear from you. Hours later, a brief reply came through. Sorry I missed your calls. Glad you're okay. Crazy busy at work this week. That was all. No offer to visit, no questions about my condition or needs. Just a cursory acknowledgement before presumably returning to his important life. I sat on my couch staring at those cold words on my phone screen, and for the first time allowed myself to feel the full weight of abandonment. My son, my only child, had chosen not to come when I needed him most. Whatever Amanda's influence might be, this was James's choice too. The realization broke something fundamental in my understanding of our relationship. A bond I had thought unbreakable had proven to be frighteningly fragile. The week after my mini-stroke passed slowly. My doctor had ordered rest, so I was on medical leave from school. Sarah and a few other colleagues took turns checking on me, bringing meals and keeping me company. The school principal called daily with updates and assurances that my class was in good hands with a substitute teacher. The kids made you get well cards, she told me. They miss you, but they understand you need to rest. Those cards with their wobbly handwriting and colorful drawings brought tears to my eyes. My students, small children with no obligation to me beyond our classroom relationship, had shown more concern than my own son. James had texted once more since his initial message, a brief, "How are you feeling?" that I answered with equal brevity. The hurt was too raw for me to manage our usual pretense that everything was fine between us. On Friday afternoon, feeling restless after days of limited activity, I decided to check social media. I rarely used Facebook, maintaining an account, mostly to see photos of friends' grandchildren, and keep up with former students who had connected with me over the years. As I scrolled through my feed, a post from a mutual friend caught my attention, a comment on a photo that mentioned James. Curious, I clicked through to see the original post. What I saw made my blood run cold. There on my screen was a picture of James, Amanda, and little Katie, all smiling broadly as they lounged beside an infinity pool overlooking a tropical beach. They were at the Paradise Cove Resort, an exclusive destination in the Bahamas that I recognized from travel magazines. James was holding a colorful drink, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in years. Katie, adorable in a ruffled swimsuit, was building a sandcastle at the edge of the pool. Amanda looked flawless as usual in a designer swimsuit and wide-brimmed hat. But it was the caption that truly stole my breath. Finally a day without the drama queen. Best family time ever, #blessed, no interruptions. I checked the date of the post Tuesday, the very day I had been rushed to the hospital. While I lay in an emergency room terrified and alone, my son and his wife had been vacationing at a luxury resort, deliberately ignoring calls from the hospital. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the comments, each one a fresh wound. "You guys deserve this break," wrote one of Amanda's friends. "That view is amazing. So jealous," commented another. And then Amanda's reply to someone asking if they were having a good time. "The best, no calls from the MIL every 5 minutes with some new crisis. James finally has a chance to relax without the guilt trips. Emil, mother-in-law, me, the drama queen, the burden, the unwanted interruption in their perfect life." I sat frozen staring at those words, unable to reconcile them with reality. What calls every 5 minutes? What crisis? What guilt trips? I had been so careful over the years not to impose, to respect their space, to accept the crumbs of attention thrown my way. I had swallowed my hurt when plans were canceled, when milestones were forgotten, when I was sidelined at family events. And this was how they saw me. As a drama queen to be escaped from. The room seemed to spin around me, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I put my phone down, afraid I might throw it across the room in a surge of anger, unlike anything I had felt before. I had experienced many emotions toward James and Amanda over the years: disappointment, sadness, longing. But this was different. This was rage, pure and clarifying. They had not just neglected me, they had actively chosen to ignore a medical emergency and then mocked me publicly while I feared for my life. The tears came then, hot and unrelenting. I cried for the little boy I had raised, who had once looked at me with such love. I cried for the relationship I thought we had now revealed as a fiction. I cried for my granddaughter growing up with parents who taught her that grandparents were inconveniences to be tolerated, not loved. I cried until my chest ached and my eyes burned, until the sky darkened outside my window and the house grew cold around me. When my phone rang, I nearly ignored it, not wanting to speak to anyone in this state. But the screen showed Dorothy's name, and I answered with a choked, "Hello." "Lorraine, are you okay? You sound terrible." The concern in my sister's voice broke the dam again, and fresh tears flowed as I told her everything: the stroke, the unanswered calls, and finally the devastating Facebook post. Those heartless, entitled... Dorothy rarely used strong language, but what followed was a string of descriptions that accurately captured my feelings toward my son and daughter-in-law in that moment. When she had calmed down, her tone became serious. "Lorraine, I've been worried about this situation for years. Amanda has been isolating James from you systematically, and he's allowed it. This isn't just thoughtlessness, it's emotional abuse toward both you and James. I just don't understand how we got here," I said, my voice raw from crying. "What did I do to make them treat me this way?" "Nothing," Dorothy said firmly. "This isn't about anything you did. It's about Amanda's need for control and James's weakness in standing up to her. But Lorraine, there's something else you should know, something I've been investigating." Her tone made me sit up straighter. "What is it?" "It's about the house," Dorothy said. "The one you helped them buy with Dad's insurance money." Dorothy had always been the practical one in our family. While I followed my heart, she followed the evidence, a trait that served her well in her career as a paralegal. When I had mentioned contributing to James and Amanda's house purchase years ago, she had immediately raised concerns. "That's a lot of money, Lorraine," she had warned. You should protect yourself legally if you're investing that much. At her insistence, I had consulted with a financial advisor before transferring the funds. His recommendation had been to remain on the deed as a co-owner, given the substantial nature of my contribution, about 30% of the home's purchase price. If anything goes wrong down the road, you'll want legal standing, he had explained. James had readily agreed at the time, signing the necessary paperwork without objection. I had assumed Amanda knew about this arrangement, though now I wondered. As Dorothy explained on the phone, she had always been suspicious of Amanda's intentions and had quietly kept an eye on the situation through a friend who worked in the county records office. The house is still in all three names, yours, James's, and Amanda's, she confirmed. But there's something else. About 3 months ago, Amanda filed paperwork inquiring about the process for removing a co-owner from a deed without their signature. She was told it wasn't possible without your consent. I felt a chill despite the warm blanket wrapped around my shoulders. Why would she do that? I think they're planning to sell the house, Dorothy said. Property values in that neighborhood have skyrocketed. They could make a substantial profit, especially considering your contribution gave them a larger house in a better area than they could have afforded otherwise. This revelation came like a second shockwave. Not only had they abandoned me in my time of need and mocked me publicly, but they were also planning to cut me out of a property I had helped them acquire, potentially cheating me out of my investment. What should I do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by this new betrayal. First, you need to talk to Richard, Dorothy said, referring to her friend who practiced real estate law. Know your options before you confront them. The very next day, as if the universe were determined to reveal the full extent of their duplicity, Amanda called. It was the first direct contact we'd had in months. Lorraine, hi, she said, her voice artificially bright. How are you? I remained silent, shocked by her audacity after what I had discovered. Anyway, she continued, filling the awkward pause, we're refinancing the house to get a better interest rate, and the bank needs you to sign some paperwork. Nothing major, just a formality, since your name is on some of the original documents. My hand tightened around the phone. What kind of paperwork exactly? I asked, keeping my voice neutral with effort. Oh, just some standard forms, Amanda said vaguely. I can email them to you, or we can meet at the bank if that's easier. They need it done by next week. I'd prefer to have my lawyer look at anything before I sign, I replied, surprising myself with my firmness. There was a pause then. A lawyer. That's really not necessary. It's just routine stuff. Nevertheless, I'd like my lawyer to review it. Another pause. I'll have them contact you directly for the documents. Amanda's tone changed, a slight edge entering her voice. James won't be happy about this, Lorraine. He's very stressed with work right now, and this refinance is important for our financial planning. I'm sure you don't want to cause him more anxiety. The manipulation was so transparent now that I could see it. The implied threat that I would be hurting James, the suggestion that I was creating problems, the positioning of herself as the protector of his well-being. I'm sure James would want me to be careful about legal matters, I replied. Please have the documents sent to Richard Bennett at Bennett Legal. I'll let him know to expect them. I ended the call before she could respond, my heart pounding but a strange sense of calm settling over me. Dorothy was right. It was time to protect myself. Richard, when I met with him the following day, confirmed my suspicions after reviewing county records and property databases. They're not refinancing, he said bluntly. They've listed the house with a realtor. It's not on the public market yet. It's what we call a pocket listing, being shown privately to select buyers. But their intent is clearly to sell. He showed me the listing agreement they had signed, obtained through his professional contacts. The asking price was nearly double what they had paid 5 years ago. The problem they're facing is that they can't complete a sale without your signature, Richard explained. As a co-owner, you have to consent to any sale and sign the deed transfer. My guess is that these refinancing papers would actually transfer your interest in the property to them completely. I felt sick imagining how close I had come to signing away my rights based on their deception. "What are my options?" I asked. Richard laid them out clearly. I could do nothing and force them to include me in any sale receiving my proportional share of the proceeds. I could offer to sell my interest to them directly for a fair price. Or most drastically, I could force a partition sale by petitioning the court, essentially requiring the property to be sold and the proceeds divided. There was another option, one that Richard mentioned almost as an afterthought. You could also sell your interest to a third party. As a co-owner, you have the right to sell your share to anyone willing to buy it. That would make that person a co-owner with James and Amanda. This last option struck a chord. If they wanted to be rid of me so badly, perhaps the most fitting response was to insert someone else into their carefully controlled lives, someone they couldn't simply dismiss or ignore. How would that work? I asked. Richard explained that several real estate investors in the area specialized in purchasing partial interests in properties. They typically paid below market value, but the transaction could be completed quickly and without the cooperation of the other owners. They'd be buying into a messy situation, so they don't pay premium prices, he warned. But it would certainly get James and Amanda's attention. I left Richard's office with a lot to think about. That evening, Dorothy called to check in. "What did Richard say?" she asked. I explained the options, including the possibility of selling my interest to an investor. "That's bold," Dorothy said after a moment. "Are you sure you want to go that route? It would likely end any chance of reconciliation with James." The question gave me pause. Despite everything, some small part of me still hoped for a restoration of our relationship. But then I remembered Amanda's Facebook post, the years of subtle exclusion, and most recently, the attempt to trick me into signing away my rights. I think that chance ended when they chose a beach vacation over coming to the hospital when I had a stroke, I said quietly. I need to protect myself now. Dorothy sighed. I hate that it's come to this, but I support whatever you decide. 2 days later, I called Richard and asked him to arrange a meeting with a potential investor. The man he recommended, Michael Jenkins, was a real estate developer known for buying distressed properties and partial interests. We met at Richard's office where Michael reviewed the property details and made an offer. His price was fair considering the circumstances, about 20% below what my share would be worth in a normal sale, but still a substantial sum. With Richard's guidance, I negotiated a slightly better deal and we signed the papers that afternoon. By the end of the week, I was no longer a co-owner of my son's house. Instead, I had a check representing my investment plus a modest return, and Michael Jenkins was now James and Amanda's new co-owner. It was done. I had taken control of the one thing I could in this painful situation. Now, I just had to wait for the fallout. The call came 3 days later. I was sitting in my small backyard, enjoying the autumn sunshine and reading a novel, when my phone rang. James's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "How could you do this to us?" His voice was tight with fury, no greeting, no preamble. "Hello, James," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "Don't hello James me. You sold your part of our house to a stranger. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking that you and Amanda were planning to sell the house without telling me, after trying to trick me into signing away my legal rights," I replied, surprised by my own steadiness. There was a moment of stunned silence before James sputtered, "That's not what was happening." "Really?" "Because I have copies of the listing agreement you signed with Amanda's real estate agency. The one for the house you're supposedly just refinancing." Another pause. "We were going to tell you once we had an offer," he said, his tone defensive. "The paperwork was just to simplify things. By removing me from the deed without my knowledge? That's not simplifying, James. That's fraud." "This is ridiculous. That was my house, my family's home. You had no right to sell your share to some property flipper." His selective outrage ignited my own anger. "I had every right, just as you had the right to come to the hospital when I had a stroke. But you chose not to." "What are you talking about?" "Last Tuesday, I collapsed at school. They called you multiple times from the hospital. You never came, never called back. I saw your wife's Facebook post from the Bahamas. Finally a day without the drama queen, wasn't it?" A longer silence followed. When James spoke again, his voice had changed, confusion mixing with the anger. What hospital? What stroke? No one called me about any stroke. County hospital called the emergency number in my phone. They left messages. My certainty wavered slightly at his apparent confusion. You never got them. No, he said firmly. I never got any calls from a hospital. And what Facebook post, I don't know what you're talking about. Check your wife's profile, I said. October 12th, the family vacation post. I heard muffled sounds as if he was moving through his house. Then a sharp intake of breath. Mom, I swear I didn't know about this post. And I never got any calls about you being in the hospital. Why didn't you call me directly? I did, multiple times. Left messages too. Another silence. I never saw them. My phone was… I don't know. Amanda said we should unplug during the vacation. She held onto my phone most of the time, said she'd let me know if there were any important calls. The implications of what he was saying began to sink in. Had Amanda deliberately kept the hospital's calls from him? It seemed almost too calculating, too cruel to believe. Yet it aligned with the pattern I had observed over years. James, I said quietly, this isn't just about the house or the hospital. It's about years of being pushed aside, made to feel unwelcome in your life. Being called a drama queen when all I've ever tried to do is love you and be part of your family. Mom, I never said you were a drama queen. No, but you stood by while Amanda did. You let her control when I could see Katie whether I was included in family events. You forgot my birthday, Christmas, everything that once mattered to us. A heavy sigh came through the phone. It's complicated, Mom. It's actually very simple, I countered. I gave you $150,000 to help buy that house. I stayed on the deed as protection for that investment. When you and Amanda decided to sell without consulting me and tried to remove me from the deed through deception, I protected myself by selling my interest to someone else. And now I'm using that money to secure my own future, since I clearly can't count on my family. Before James could respond, I heard Amanda's voice in the background, demanding to know who he was talking to. The phone seemed to be muffled briefly before her voice came through clearly. Lorraine, what have you done? Her tone was ice cold. Do you have any idea what mess you've created? This investor is demanding to see all our financial records for the property and threatening to force a sale if we don't buy him out at a ridiculous price. That sounds like your problem, Amanda, I replied. Perhaps you should have thought about that before trying to cut me out of my own investment, or before posting about your wonderful drama-free vacation while I was in the hospital having a stroke. Oh, please, she scoffed. A mini stroke. That's hardly an emergency. My grandmother had those all the time. You're just proving my point about being a drama queen. I heard James's shocked voice. Amanda, my mother was in the hospital. She's fine, isn't she? Amanda snapped. Meanwhile, we're dealing with a real crisis here. This Jenkins guy is threatening our home. The home that my mother helped us buy. James said, his voice harder than I had heard it in years. The home we were planning to sell without telling her. There was a telling silence before Amanda spoke again, her voice now artificially controlled. Lorraine, surely we can work this out. Family shouldn't behave this way. I agree, I said quietly. Family shouldn't ignore emergency calls. Family shouldn't mock each other on social media. Family shouldn't try to cheat each other out of their property rights. Yet here we are. I heard muffled arguing between them before James came back on the line. Mom, I'm sorry about the hospital. I swear I didn't know. But this house thing it's extreme. You've put us in an impossible position. If we don't buy this guy out, he could force us to sell our home. The home you were already planning to sell, I reminded him. On our terms when we were ready. The frustration in his voice was palpable. Now we're backed into a corner. If you were upset, why didn't you just talk to me first? The irony of his question after years of diminished communication wasn't lost on me. Would you have listened? James, really listened? Or would Amanda have explained it all away, convinced you I was overreacting again? His silence was answer enough. I'm truly sorry it came to this, I said, meaning it despite everything. I never wanted to hurt you, but I couldn't let myself be hurt anymore either. So that's it. His voice cracked slightly. You're just done with us. With me, with Katie. The mention of my granddaughter sent a pang through my heart. I'm not done with loving any of you, but I am done with being treated as an afterthought, a burden, a drama queen to be escaped from. If that ever changes, you know where to find me. Amanda's voice cut through again, louder now, as if she had grabbed the phone. This is nothing but selfish revenge. You've always been jealous of my relationship with James, always trying to guilt him into choosing you over me. Well, it didn't work. He chose me, and he always will. If you think this stunt will change that, you're delusional. Amanda, give me the phone, I heard James say. No, she needs to hear this if she wants to declare war on this family, fine. But she should know what it means. No more visits with Katie, no more holidays, nothing. That's not your decision alone, James protested, but his voice sounded weak, uncertain. It absolutely is if she's going to threaten our home. Choose James, right now. Your mother or your family. I couldn't bear to hear his answer, knowing what it would be, what it had always been. Goodbye, James, I said, and ended the call. I sat in my garden for a long time afterward, watching the birds at my feeder, listening to the distant sounds of neighborhood children playing. My phone rang several times, James again, but I let it go to voicemail. Whatever he had to say, it would be too little too late. Or worse, confirmation that he had once again chosen Amanda's version of family over the woman who had raised him. That evening I received a text from him. This isn't over, Mom, but I need time to figure things out. Please don't shut me out completely. I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, I was putting myself first. It was painful, terrifying, and somehow strangely liberating. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have anticipated when I made that fateful decision to sell my share of the house. With the proceeds from the sale, I purchased a small but comfortable one-bedroom condominium closer to my school, reducing my commute and creating a fresh start in a space that was entirely my own. I invested the remaining funds with a financial advisor Dorothy recommended, finally prioritizing my retirement security after years of putting it aside for James's needs. The first weeks after our confrontation were the hardest. I jumped every time my phone rang, half hoping it would be James with a genuine apology, half dreading another angry tirade. He texted occasionally brief messages, asking how I was doing, or saying he missed me, but never addressing the fundamental issues between us. I responded politely but distantly, unwilling to slip back into our old pattern of pretending everything was fine. Amanda made good on her threat, no more visits with Katie. That loss cut deeper than anything else. I had little hope of reconciliation with Amanda, and even my relationship with James seemed fractured beyond repair, but being cut off from my granddaughter felt like a punishment far exceeding my crime. She's using Katie as a weapon, Dorothy observed during one of our weekly dinner dates. It's cruel to both of you. And to Katie, I added softly, wondering if my granddaughter missed me as much as I missed her. To manage my grief, I sought help from a support group for grandparents estranged from their grandchildren. The stories I heard there helped me realize I wasn't alone. So many others had experienced similar heartbreak manipulation by adult children or their spouses being treated as convenient babysitters, but not true family members having access to grandchildren used as leverage. The hardest part, said Margaret, a woman in her 70s who hadn't seen her grandchildren in 3 years, is accepting that you can't control the situation. You can only control how you respond to it. Those words became my mantra as I worked to rebuild my life around the painful absence. I focused on my teaching, pouring extra energy into my students. I joined a book club at the local library, making new friends with shared interests. I volunteered at an after-school program for underprivileged children, finding joy in mentoring young people, even if they weren't my own flesh and blood. Slowly, I began to heal. The constant ache of loss didn't disappear, but it became manageable, no longer dominating my every waking thought. I learned to appreciate the freedom of answering only to myself, of decorating my new home exactly as I pleased, of making plans without worrying about last-minute cancellations. I heard through Dorothy's connections that James and Amanda had indeed been forced to sell their house, unable to buy out the investor at his asking price. They had moved to a smaller home in a less prestigious neighborhood. Amanda had posted less on social media since then, perhaps humbled by the experience, or simply too busy managing their new financial reality. It was on a Saturday morning in early spring that fate intervened in the form of an unexpected encounter. I was shopping at the farmer's market that had become part of my weekend routine when I heard a small voice behind me. "Baba." I froze my hand, hovering over a display of strawberries. That nickname only one person in the world called me that. I turned slowly, hardly daring to hope. There she was. Katie, now almost 4, her dark curls bouncing as she jumped up and down, pulling away from the hand that held hers. James's hand. "Katie, wait," he was saying, but she had already broken free and was running toward me, arms outstretched. I knelt down, opening my arms to receive her breathing in the sweet scent of her hair as she wrapped her small arms around my neck. "Ba, I missed you. Where did you go?" "I missed you too, sweetheart," I whispered, fighting tears. "So very much." James approached slowly, uncertainty written across his face. He looked different, thinner, more tired, with new lines around his eyes. He shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot as Katie continued to chatter about her new preschool, her favorite toys, seemingly unaware of the tension between the adults. "Mom," he said finally, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I come every Saturday," I replied, rising to my feet but keeping hold of Katie's hand. "It's good to see you, James." He nodded, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. "You look well." "Thank you. How are you? How's the new house?" He grimaced slightly. "It's okay. Smaller than we're used to, but we're managing." He hesitated, then added, "Amanda and we're having some problems. She's staying with her parents for a while." This news surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. The stress of their financial setback would have put strain on any marriage, especially one where control and image seemed so important. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it despite everything. I had never wished for James's unhappiness, only for him to see the truth of his situation. "It's been coming for a while," he admitted. "The house situation was just the final straw. She blames me for not handling you better." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "As if you were a problem to be managed rather than my mother." Katie had wandered a few steps away to look at a display of honey jars still within sight, but out of earshot. "James," I said carefully, "I never wanted to cause trouble in your marriage." He shook his head. "You didn't. Not really. You just exposed what was already there." He took a deep breath. "I should have come to the hospital that day. I'm sorry I didn't." The apology, so long awaited, caught me off guard. "Did you ever find out what happened with those calls?" His expression darkened. "Yes. Amanda deleted the voicemails and blocked the hospital's number. She said she thought it was just you trying to interrupt our vacation with something minor." He looked away, ashamed. "I found out when I checked our phone records during the separation proceedings." "Oh, James?" I breathed, horrified, despite having suspected something similar. "There's a lot I'm coming to terms with," he continued. "Ways I let her isolate me from you, from friends. Things I accepted that I shouldn't have." He glanced at Katie, lowering his voice. "It's not easy to admit you've been manipulated, that you chose the wrong person, that you hurt the right ones along the way." I wanted to reach out to hug him, as I had when he was a boy, and came to me with skinned knees or hurt feelings. But too much had happened. Too many bridges burned for us to return to that simple comfort so quickly. Instead, I asked, "What will you do now?" "Try to be a good father," he said promptly. "Figure out who I am without Amanda defining everything. And—" he hesitated, vulnerability showing through. "Maybe try to rebuild some of what I've broken, if that's even possible." He looked at me directly, then the question unspoken but clear. Was there a way back for us? Could the damage be repaired? I thought of the last 6 months of the pain, but also the growth I had experienced. Of the stronger person, I had become someone who valued herself enough to set boundaries to demand respect. "It won't be easy," I said honestly. "Trust takes time to rebuild." "I know," he nodded. "And I don't expect you to forgive everything right away. I'd like Katie to know her grandmother, and I'd like a chance to be your son again, the kind of son you deserve." Katie returned then, tugging at James's hand. "Daddy, can Ba come have lunch with us? Please." James looked at me, waiting for my response. I considered the invitation, weighing the risk of new hurt against the possibility of healing. The old Lorraine might have jumped at this chance, so eager for connection that she would ignore all caution. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "How about we start with something smaller?" I suggested. "Maybe Katie and I could have a play date next weekend at the park, perhaps?" James nodded, understanding the measured response. "That sounds perfect. Doesn't it, Katie?" Katie bounced excitedly, already planning what toys to bring. As we exchanged numbers and made arrangements, I felt a cautious hope unfurling inside me. Not a naive expectation that everything would be instantly fixed, but a mature recognition that healing was possible if approached with care and proper boundaries. We parted ways with promises to meet the following Saturday. As I watched them walk away, Katie turning to wave enthusiastically, I realized that the path forward wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending the hurt never happened. It was about building something new on the foundation of hard-won wisdom. The money from selling my share of the house had given me financial security. But the experience itself had given me something far more valuable, the knowledge that I was strong enough to stand alone if necessary, to protect myself, to demand respect. That self-respect had changed everything, creating space for authentic relationships rather than the hollow imitations I had accepted before. As I continued my shopping, I felt lighter than I had in months. The future remained uncertain. There were no guarantees that James would follow through, that our fragile new beginning would strengthen rather than fracture again. But whatever happened, I would face it as this new version of myself, a woman who had learned that sometimes true love means setting boundaries, that walking away can be an act of courage rather than defeat, and that it's never too late to reclaim your worth. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from family members who took you for granted? I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our stories helps others feel less alone in their struggles. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about finding strength through life's challenges. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that it's never too late to stand up for yourself with dignity and grace.